And by tradition, since this is an off-site briefing, I will speak about the links of St. Petersburg and Leningrad region.
The consistent work of the leadership of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region to build up diverse inter-regional and foreign economic ties with friendly countries, taking into account the realities of the current geopolitical situation. Following the SPF, it is expected that St. Petersburg will reach a record number of agreements with investors in order to further strengthen Russia's technological sovereignty. Efforts are being made to increase the foreign trade turnover of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region, stabilize the trade balance compared to the level of 22-23, and further diversify the structure of foreign trade. China remains the main trading partner. Trade with Kazakhstan is expanding. Against the backdrop of strengthening economic cooperation between the CIS countries, the development of trade relations with Belarus has great potential. Cooperation with Iran and Turkey is developing. The listed countries account for 77% of trade turnover, while China's share in exports is 43.2%, and in imports 43%. Large deals were also concluded with Myanmar, the Republic of Korea, Brazil, Germany, and Egypt. Relations with Serbia have been expanding, also in such fields as technology, tourism, and urban infrastructure. The volume of trade turnover of St. Petersburg in 2024 increased by 9% compared to 2023 and amounted to $56.7 billion. The value of exports increased by 8.6% and amounted to $29 billion. Exports continued to grow to $27 billion. That's an increase of around 9%. The Leningrad region strengthened its cooperation with its Azerbaijani, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and South Ossetian partners. It is planned to sign agreements with the Republic of Abkhazia, regions of Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Syria, and the Republic of South Africa. The region's foreign trade turnover in 2024 slowed its decline to 5.1% and amounted to $10.7 billion. The largest trading partners are China, Turkey, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Brazil, India, and Vietnam. The total share of trade with these countries is 75.6%. The Leningrad region also occupies one of the leading positions in terms of growth of trade turnover with Belarus. Joint projects are being implemented in the area of construction, production of agriculture, and municipal equipment. In general, the Leningrad region and St. Petersburg are leaders in building up the constructual and legal frameworks for interregular cooperations. New agreements are achieved with friendly countries, and also St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region continue to maintain close contacts with compatriots in the Baltics who faced persecution by Russophobic regimes due to their unwillingness to take an anti-Russian position. They don't want to deny things that are part of their philosophy. They are prosecuted for that, and the Russian regions, of course, are busy also celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Great Patriotic War. These celebrations were visited by delegations from Abkhazia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And survivors of the siege and veterans living abroad made their contributions to preserving the sacred memory of the feat of the generation of victors by taking an active part in these celebrations.
On the 23rd of June, Sergei Lavrov will take part in the 11th Annual Scientific and Expert Forum, Primakov Readings, which is organized by the Primakov National Research Institute of World Economy and International Relations at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Every year, for many years, this forum has been gathering influential policymakers and economists and international scientists from around the world, and this forum takes a special place among such events. Let me remind you that Evgeny Primakov predicted back in the 1990s that multipolarity would become a key trend in global development. At that moment, it was a revolutionary, truly revolutionary concept that he was promoting as Minister of Foreign Affairs, the position he held from 1996 to 1998. The current state of affairs in the international arena has fully confirmed the political foresight of Yevgeny Maximovich. And in his speech, the reading, Sergei Lavrov will assess current international events and talk about foreign policy priorities. And of course, there will be discussions as part of which he will take questions. On the 24th, 25th June, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation will pay an official visit to Turkmenistan, during which he will hold talks with the President of Turkmenistan and Deputy Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers. There will be high-level contacts. The parties will discuss political contacts at the highest levels, the development of bilateral relations, including cooperation in the trade and others. An exchange of views will take place on issues of the region. It is the epitome of the most important milestones in global history and culture. It is the city that has inspired an impressive array of poets, writers, composers, and representatives of all kinds. Composers and representatives of creative professions, scientists who got famous across the world. So many. It is the epitome of the most important milestones in global history and culture. It is the city that has inspired an impressive array of poets, writers, violation of the UN Charter and norms of international law. Of course, you are familiar with two statements by the statements of the Russian Foreign Ministry, which decisively condemn this criminal gamble fraught with catastrophic consequences for regional and global security in general. Attempts to justify it with imaginary non-proliferation concerns are, of course, outright cynicism. Let me remind you that as of the 13th of June, and this is proof of the above argument, it was the time of the first strikes on Iranian territory, and at that moment an intensive, albeit naturally complicated, negotiation process was going in the form of indirect Iranian and American contacts with the assistance of Oman. And the next round of this substantive dialogue was scheduled for the 15th of June, for which Tehran prepared a number of proposals intended to bring the desired outcome closer. And the session of the IAEA Board of Governors was also in full swing, which discussed the issues of the Iranian nuclear program. As a result of Israel's actions, the multilateral efforts initiated with considerable difficulty aimed at reducing confrontation, finding reliable and agreed solutions to eliminate unfounded suspicions and prejudices about the Iranian peaceful aim have been undermined and set back. Isn't this what West Jerusalem was trying to deliberately achieve, making a conscious choice in favor of escalating tensions and disrupting peace efforts? Many are posing this question, asking themselves this question. The hypocrisy of the leaders of individual countries is also striking. And by diligently fanning anti-Iranian hysteria, they actually incited Israel. And now they're demanding that the Iranians, however strange it may seem, return to the negotiating table. So we are anxiously following the ongoing military operations, and we can see numerous fatalities, the lives claimed of civilians, and we can see an attack on the objects, nuclear installations, nuclear sites, which poses a risk to global security and actually keeps us on the brink of a catastrophe. whose implications will be felt everywhere, even in Israel. And Russia calls on the Israeli leadership to come to senses and immediately stop attacks on nuclear installations and sites under safeguards and subject to IAEA verification activities. And we're particularly concerned about the safety of the Bushehr nuclear power plant, which employs Russian specialists. The harsh and irreconcilable reaction of the world's majority countries to Israeli attacks on Iran's territory, including nuclear energy infrastructure, coupled with the results of an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council on June 13th and a special session of the IAEA Board of Governors on June 16th, indicate a rejection of the confrontational course and destructive actions of the Israeli leadership. They find understanding and support only from those states that are its actual accomplices. Today, the main thing is to prevent further spiraling of violence, to achieve ceasefire and restore peace, which in turn will create the prerequisites for bringing the situation back to the negotiation table. We are actually ready to take diplomatic efforts, and we are making them in this direction. As you know, the Russian President Vladimir Putin had telephone conversations with Israeli Prime Minister, President of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The next day, Vladimir Putin had talks with U.S. President, and there were contacts with the President of Turkey, President of United Arab Emirates. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held telephone conversations with the heads of foreign ministries of Iran, Turkey, Egypt, Oman. The current crisis in the Middle East was also touched upon in a telephone conversation between our Russian Foreign Minister and Foreign Minister of Azerbaijan, and it talks with Indonesian Foreign Minister. As you know, these are high-level, ministerial-level negotiations and telephone contacts. All of them are ongoing, even these particular hours, at this particular time. We hope that the understanding that there is no alternative to finding mutually acceptable negotiated solutions to existing problems will prevail. We will continue to support the goals of resolving the issue of the Iranian nuclear program with due reliance on international law, the principle of equal and indivisible security, as well as with mutual consideration and calibrated balance of interests. We would like to particularly warn Washington against military intervention in the situation, which would be an extremely dangerous step with truly unpredictable negative consequences. Russia notes the clear statements by the Iranian side about its continued commitment to the obligations under the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and its readiness to resume contacts with the United States to work out possible solutions to remove any unfounded suspicions and prejudices regarding Tehran's nuclear program. Given that Israeli attacks stop, Moscow supports this attitude and firmly believes that the desired settlement can be reliably achieved only through diplomacy and negotiations. The goals of nuclear non-proliferation, the fundamental basis of which is the non-proliferation treaty, should not be achieved through aggression and at the cost of innocent victims. And now let's speak about the work also done by Russian diplomats.
To promote the leaving of Russian citizens from non-safe and quite dangerous areas that were mentioned above. Our embassies, our general consulates are working on this, of course being closely controlled by the Russian administration. The Foreign Ministry of Russia, Russian embassies in Kuwait, Iran and other countries are working to evacuate Russian officials from there as soon as possible. In total, from June the 14th, from Iran, Azerbaijan and Armenia, in order to leave these countries, around 550 people, including some filmmakers, tourists, oil producers, and just civilians left these countries. Israel has been left by Also, a large number of Russian citizens, they also left from airports of Egypt and other countries. And the Ministry of Economy of the Russian Federation recommended to stop selling tours to Israel. Right now, there are several routes to evacuate. There are, of course, risks and dangers on the road, and these need to be considered. There are practical recommendations. We publish them. We keep publishing them, so please follow the Telegram channels of Russian Tehran embassies, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There are also 3 crossings: Burbulag, Bezaragan, Epokurazi, Sinderesero. From Israel, there is the checkpoint with Egypt that works 24 hours, where you can also leave. And also in Jordan, from 9 a.m. to 16 o'clock, and also Itzhak Rabin, from Baku to Russia. There are up to 20 flights a day, operated by Aeroflot and other Russian companies, as well as Azerbaijan Airlines from Yerevan. There are up to 20 flights. There are several airlines from Cairo. That is 5 flights by Egypt Air, but the situation is changing very quickly, so we recommend our citizens to follow up with the information on the internet websites of the Foreign Ministry. That's our official Telegram channel, our website, as well as our embassies channels in these countries. And you can call the emergency numbers in Iran, Azerbaijan, Egypt, Jordan, and of course all of our embassies have their emergency numbers that you can reach. And of course, there is a hotline that works 24 hours of the Foreign Ministry. There is an app that we also have to help you abroad. And of course, today we will publish the links in our briefing as well. We want to express our gratitude to the administration of these countries helping us to organize these missions. And of course, during the escalation, of course, especially during the first days, we are working promptly with the Baku authorities. Today, the border there was crossed by almost 500 Russian citizens, and they are very grateful for the hospitality that was shown to them by the Azerbaijani people. Also, our Russian Tchaikovsky orchestra was given a special concert in Azerbaijan on the one of these days, and you see that sometimes in our everyday life that does not have any war or any escalation, it is hard to find common language with people, but sometimes the situation is completely opposite. When we don't know what's happening next, whether we will stay alive, how the best that we have in us manifests itself in such dramatic situations, and we are very grateful to everyone who keeps helping. The escalation in the Middle East that led to the closure of airspace in most of the countries of this region made it hard for all the crews of Russian planes stuck in the region. I wonder if people who started all of this made any thought about this to themselves, and for example, a flight, the Air Sibir, that had an emergency landing in Ashgabat, and we are very grateful to the Turkmenistan's authorities for promptly helping the passengers of that flight. We call to Russian citizens to abstain from any travel to these regions because they stay dangerous. If you cannot leave, then do not approach, do not come close to military objects, do not take any videos, photos, avoid crowds, follow the rules issued by the government, and go to any underground shelters that you can find. And we promptly publish updates on the situation. Now to the Ukrainian crisis. Russia has almost finished fulfilling the obligations as a goodwill gesture. The repatriation of 6,060 bodies of dead Ukrainian servicemen was organized. 78 bodies of our fighters were handed over to us. The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed its readiness to transfer another 2,239 bodies of Ukrainian soldiers in Kiev. The parity exchange of seriously ill and wounded soldiers, as well as young soldiers under the age of 25, continues. I will remind you that these were initiatives of Russia. It takes place in several stages. It is expected that at least 1,000 people will return home from each side. There is a list of 339 Ukrainian children. I would like to remind you that they were not stolen, not kidnapped, not forcibly moved. These children could not be reunited with their families. They are being searched for. It's a tragedy, but unfortunately this tragedy happens in different countries, in different cities. Some of them are very successful places. This territory since 2014 has been under attacks of the Kiev regime, and our delegation will be ready to arrive in Istanbul to continue the negotiations. Specific dates will be determined in the near future. Right now, during the third round, we intend to exchange comments on the memoranda of the parties submitted on May 28th and June 2nd. Russia's conscientious implementation of the Istanbul agreements provoked a fit of rage in Kiev and comments beyond cynicism. Both journalists and regime functionaries took part in this. One of the TV presenters on Channel 24 claimed that there were allegedly no 6,000 dead bodies of Ukrainian soldiers. That it was an exaggeration. I really have to make up my mind to say these things. It's really hard. So, according to her, Russia, in order to increase the amount of bodies transferred to Ukraine, Russians were engaged in dismembering corpses, allegedly, according to her. Parts of which were then placed in different bags. Moreover, on the territory of our newly reunited regions, mass exhumations of local residents who had died earlier and were buried there before the start of the special military operation were allegedly carried out. Such measures, as it was falsely claimed, were planned and aimed to demonstrate to the population the scale of the problem, provoke protests, and achieve the overthrow of the government. So, is it hard to notice the scale of the problem without those 6,000 bodies? I think they are showing enough of this problem to their own citizens. The same odious logic is used by the head of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Igor Klimenko, who has taken it upon himself to accuse Russia of deliberately complicating the identification process of the dead military personnel transferred to Kiev. According to him, the bodies are allegedly returned in a different state, as if we are complexing this issue. And this is the devil's talk, really, that we hear from them constantly. So, according to him, the bodies are allegedly returned in an extremely disfigured state, body parts in different bags. Is that something that an adult can say, a person who is a government official? The people who died as part of the military operations, that's not the end of it. The next that I'm going to share with you from his quotes is absolutely horrific. He said that his bodies, the bodies of Ukrainian soldiers were mixed with the bodies of Ukrainians, were mixed with Russian bodies. When he was asked how he determined that, he couldn't answer. I think that this is a medical case by this point. But Zelensky surpassed all of them. He was in Austria on June the 16th. He said that Russia allegedly offered to exchange up. He should explain to us instead why, period of time, the number 2,000 children somehow turned into 339. I would like to say that Russia does not kidnap, deport, forcefully transfer children, much less exchange them for prisoners of war. Our soldiers save children without asking them whose country citizens they are, what blood is flowing in their veins, what religion they are. They only want to save these children. They are taken away from military areas to save them. And Maria Lvova Belova, our official children's rights, she's a presidential commissioner for children's rights. She's working with Qatar, Belarus, and another number of other countries. She's working to reunite children with their families. To date, 101 Ukrainian children from 81 families have been reunited with relatives in Ukraine and other countries, and 22 children from 15 families have been returned to Russia from Ukraine. We would like to note that the Russian diplomatic missions have been repeatedly contacted by desperate Ukrainian citizens who are being deprived of their children by the social services of Western European countries. They turn to Russia because the Ukrainian embassies refuse to help them, citing certain political circumstances. I can explain to you what these political circumstances are. If the Ukrainian embassy in the EU country demands to search for these children in the EU, then the myth of children disappearing only by Russia or due to Russia will disappear. It will be obvious that that is not the case. And this is the absolute cynicism, because that's how they deal with their own children. maybe they could say it's another case of Russian propaganda, but their official statistics is that 255 children were removed from Ukrainian families in Europe, and that is their official Ukrainian statistics. The information of the National Police of Ukraine, published by the Ukraine Foreign News Agency on April 17, 2024, that more than 160 Ukrainian children, about whom Bankova said that they had been taken to Russia, were suddenly found in Germany. And the truth will prevail, it will come to light, and everybody will be absolutely horrified at the level of hypocrisy that was spread in Baja. This is another case of anti-Russian propaganda that has no merit, no facts. I would like to reiterate that Russia, throughout its entire history, has always shown humanism in the best meaning of this word. Just remember Kreptov Park. That is the statue of the Russian soldier that is not just a soldier who is carrying a girl. It's a German girl. It's a fixation of a historic fact. These children had names. Of course, the terrorist nature of the Kiev regime is known, but I will give you numbers and facts to support this characteristic of this regime. They wanted to overshadow this event as much as possible. On the 20th of June, the Day of Russia, targeted Russian civilians in Russian regions. Over the past week, 104 people were injured by the attacks. 8 people were killed, including 1 minor. 96 people were injured, including 14 children and teenagers. In the Kursk region on June the 9th, a civilian was killed in the village of Prigorodnaya Slobodka, and another 5 people were injured. On the June the 10th, in the village of Sheptuchovka, as a result of the explosion of a Ukrainian mine, 2 combined harvester operators received thermal burns. After the attack of enemy drones on the village of Marina, 3 children aged 7, 9 and 13 were injured. Where are all the NGOs who are helping the Ukrainian regime, who say that they care about the children? They do not care about children. These airstrikes hit the hospitals and schools. On the 11th of June in the Rilsky district, a Ukrainian drone chasing a civilian automobile injured the driver. On June the 10th, a UAV hit a gas station in Belgorod, killing 1 person and injuring 5. In Shebekina, in Belgorod region, 6 civilians were injured as a result of a drone strike. On June the 12th, a 2-year-old child was killed in a UAV attack in the village of Borisovka, and his grandmother was sent to hospital in serious condition. In the Bryansk region, the Ukrainian armed forces attacked the village of Brachov with drones, injuring 2 people. On June the 5th, the Ukrainian drone hit a civilian car in Podlesny in Novoselki. In the DPR between June 9th and 15th, at least 14 people were injured, including 6 teenagers and 1 employee of the Russian Emergencies Ministry. A woman born in 1957 was seriously injured in Lepestok, was injured by stepping on a mine. In Makeivka, a married couple a man born in 1977, a woman born in 1980 were killed in an attack by Ukrainian armed forces. In Donetsk, 14 people were injured by Hamas missiles. A 17-year-old boy was injured in a drone attack on Kremenaya. In the Kherson region on June the 11th, a resident of the village of Proletarka was injured due to the shelling of the armed forces of Ukraine. Forest fires also broke out with a total fire area of 43 hectares. 392 settlements were left without electricity, more than 250,000 residents. On June the 12th, 2 people, including a 79-year-old woman, were injured in strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces. In Alyoshki, the enemy fired at an ambulance. In Tatarstan on June the 15th, as a result of a Ukrainian drone strike on an automobile plant in the Labogo district, 18 people were injured, 2 of whom died under the wreckage of drones that fell into the parking lot next to the checkpoint. 3 children were among the wounded. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that on the 26th of June at 11 a.m. in the press center of the Russia Putin News Agency, there will be a presentation of the next report of the International Public Tribunal for the crimes of Ukrainian neo-Nazis, atrocities and war crimes of the Kiev regime in Dzerzhinsk. I invite representatives of Russian and foreign media to take part in this event. There are also punishments for crimes committed by the Kiev regime. Russian courts continue to sentence Ukrainian neo-Nazis and mercenaries for the armed blocking of the village of Ogovka in the Kursk region. Militants of the Ukrainian armed forces were sentenced. All of them got 15 years. Kozhemyak, Shved, Vodskovsky, as well as Galinsky, Yemelyanov, Nazarenko, Rashkov, Svilin, who got 16 years. 6 Ukrainian servicemen of the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, Nagorny Kapachenko and Mishiko, all got 16.5 years imprisonment, as well as Refaluk, Chepela, Yutskovsky, 16 years imprisonment. Soldiers of the 95th Separate Amphibious Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Ukraine were sentenced to prison for blocking the village of Pogribki in the Kursk region, 16 years and 15 years. A mercenary from Denmark, Annabelle Jorgensen, was sentenced in absentia to 26 years in a penal colony. A sentence of 28 years in prison was handed down to the Colombian mercenary Pablo Puentes Borges. About Pistorius' visit to Kiev. On the 12th of June this year, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius paid an unannounced visit to Kiev. His task was to check the clock on the current areas of German and European assistance with a focus on industrial military cooperation. Pistorius announced possible additional support to Ukraine in the amount of 1.9 billion euros, a total of 48 billion euros since the beginning of the special military operation. He admitted that the funds could be used, among other things, for the production of long-range missiles on its territory. This is something that is needed to destroy the border population of Ukraine. According to polls, 63% of Germans are strongly opposed to the delivery of Taurus missiles, and 55% reject plans for joint production of long-range systems. I would also like to mention the plans of the EU and NATO to boost Ukraine's defense capability. Speaking in simple terms, they are digging the grave for Ukrainians. On the 12th of June this year in Rome, the foreign ministers of the Weimar Plus format countries, United Kingdom, Germany, Spain, Italy, Poland and France, in the company of the NATO Secretary General, the EU High Representatives of Foreign Affairs and Security Affairs, and the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs. They spoke in favor of strengthening the armed forces and expanding cooperation with Kiev in the area of the military-industrial complex in order to enhance Europe's defense capability in the face of the alleged mythical Russian threats. Of course, our president has discussed this already as part of the forum, these subjects. Of course, in Rome, they were talking about how they need more sanctions, more pressure on Russia. They need to come together. And it doesn't matter if these sanctions don't work. And our president talked about this yesterday. But apparently they just like sanctioning Russia and pressuring Russia. And another example of this aggressive European behavior is the latest data from the Kiel Institute of World Economy, dated June 16th this year. According to its calculations, the total amount of EU military assistance to Kiev reached 72 billion euros, while the United States provided 65 billion euros, a record increase in funding. Occurred in March-April of this year. Just look how much they have lost. They lost possibilities to trade with us and other countries. Just look at these numbers. For decades, they couldn't find a million or two to save their own poor people who they allegedly care about. But the money was always scarce. They couldn't help African people with water or with medical appliances in South Asia. They were constantly talking about how they needed to raise funds in the UN, etc. But somehow it never happened. And now see how they immediately find gigantic sums when they need to. For goals that are completely opposite of those humanitarian goals that they proclaimed. Not to help, but to kill, not to heal, but to destroy, not to educate, but to completely disintegrate new generations. Now to G7 in Canada. It did not have the results Zelensky expected from it. First of all, they did not organize a meeting between Trump and Zelensky that he hoped for. Obviously, they did not. They could not secure the help they wanted. As you know, there was no joint statement on Ukraine, so Zelensky left without any results. But there was a good article, surprisingly, in Politico by Erhan Nuriyev, who is a famous German Alexander von Humboldt member. The 17th of June, just recently it was published in Politico. It highlights that the West will not be able to help Ukraine to win this conflict, and the victory in this war stopped being a realistic goal, regardless of how many billions the West will give Ukraine. And our president has also touched upon this yesterday. No matter how much they provide, they will not be able to achieve these mythical goals, to defeat Nazism in Ukraine, to defeat us in this conflict. And the author says that this unpopular point of view in Brussels or Washington, but even they more or less gradually start admitting that it's true. And right now, the help that is needed is to not continue this war, but to stop the war and to minimize the harm. And right now, not so much depends on the arms, but on diplomacy. And I would like to add that it is common sense. I want to reiterate that this was words of the expert from Alexander von Humboldt's foundation. We also see the struggle of the Kiev regime with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. The Kiev regime continues its struggle with it, along with forceful methods. Threats of forced mobilization of representatives of the clergy have now been used for this purpose. Now they have approved a list of religious organizations that are critical for the functioning of the economy and ensuring the life of the population in a special period, and whose clergy will accordingly be entitled to a reservation from being recruited into the AFU. It looks like they will be choosing whose crosses they like better, and will choose people with symbols of other religions who will be selected to be recruited, and those favorites will not be recruited. This has never been seen before. What country on earth, what regime on this planet has ever conjured something like that? If we saw something like this in a film or a book, we would think that this is an absolute dystopia, absolutely impossible in real life. But this is reality already in Ukraine. There were more than 7,000 such organizations. Of course, the list includes the entirety Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Uniats, Protestants, Evangelists, Adventists, Neo-Pagan and other communities. But not a single structure belonging to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was on the list. In order to avoid mobilization, priests of the canonical church are offered to voluntarily transfer with their parish to the UOCU and legalize the change of jurisdiction. How can you describe this? Change your jurisdiction and then you will be immune to recruitment. However, military enlistment officers have long been approaching the clergy of the UOC, but from now on they will have a free hand, and cases of forced mobilization of the clergy will occur more often. Unfortunately, there are some examples of this already. On June the 11th of this year, Archpriest Alexander Zhuk, rector of the UOC Rural Church, was detained in Rovno and hastily sent to the unit after a military medical commission. On the same day, in the Ternopil region, military commissars seized the rector of the Pachaev Holy Spirit Monastery Skit, Archimandrite Paphnutius. These facts confirm the urgency of a special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine and eliminate threats emanating from the territory.
And another important topic I would like to mention in mass media, they speak about the involvement. I would like to speak about Sahel region, and citing official sources, there was a statement of the involvement of Ukrainian intelligence in assisting the terrorist group for the support of Islam and Muslims, which on the 30th of May carried out an attack on the positions of the Malian armed forces in the Kulikoro region. So here we mean the supply of unmanned aerial vehicles to terrorists by the Kiev regime through the terror of one of the neighboring countries. The provision of intelligence and so on. So according to available information, during the counter-terrorist operation, the Malian Defense and Security Forces found incriminating documents belonging to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. An unmanned aerial vehicle with identifying inscriptions in Ukrainian was also seized. And the Kiev regime continues to demonstrate its terrorist nature. Its ties with African terrorists were previously confirmed by the press secretary of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Andrei Yusuf, and the Ukrainian ambassador. They publicly stated that they had existed terrorist forces that carried out an attack on a convoy of Malian soldiers. And we can say that Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso appealed to the United Nations Security Council, demanding the measures be taken in connection with the Kiev regime's support for terrorism in Africa. And we provide updates on the information, including such information as for regular attacks on civilian infrastructure. And the second front in Africa has been apparently decided to open, and they plan to stimulate terrorist activity in African states that are friendly to us. So for a whole year since the tragedy in Mali, not a single Western power has condemned Kiev's support for terrorist groups, even when the Africans themselves pointed this out. And also the current reaction of the Western Bloc to the terrorist attacks committed by Ukrainian neo-Nazis in Russia also fits into the strategy of criminally covering up the proteges. All responsibility lies with the neo-Bandera regime and its Western accomplices. As you know, our minister releases reports, thematic reports on human rights, and a lot of data is used so as to issue such reports. A new report has been issued on human rights in Ukraine. The numerous facts of human rights violations that exist confirm that the situation in Ukraine has seriously deteriorated. It is obvious that the Kiev regime, which has usurped power, is now increasingly showing its openly Nazi essence, committing countless gross violations of human rights in all spheres of public life. In Ukraine, police dictatorship has been effectively established, and legal chaos and lawlessness reign. Besides, various manifestations of neo-Nazism are growing, including aggressive propaganda of ideology, falsification of the history of the Great Patriotic War in order to glorify the Nazis and their accomplices, the cultivation of nationalist sentiments among the population. This report provides a large number of false facts or confirming all of this, glorification, various ways of the Nazi criminal Bandera, the glorification of the Nazis, honoring of the few survivors. The Nazi approaches are also implemented in relation to the Russian-speaking population. At present, everything Russian is banned, and a course has been set for the elimination of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and it means its whole essence is abolished, about to be abolished. There is a large-scale campaign, an unprecedented campaign of violent seizure of churches by militants with support of local authorities. It is all underway, followed by the legalization of the results of such raiding. So there are meetings, rallies, different gatherings. Before that, monuments to heroes of patriotic war and everything linked to the great victory were just taken down with the proposal that this is done for decommunization purposes, and this was sanctioned by the head of the state. So this means rewriting the whole history, and it is fantastic. It is actually unimaginable that on the one hand they do this decommunization, and on the other, in religion, they use real measures used in the worst sense under communists, when there were some exaggerated reactions concerning the clergy, concerning representatives of religions. So how does it all fit? How does it fit into one head? On the one hand, decommunization, and on the other hand, the use of very methods applied during that period, which were later considered and recognized criminal in some cases and unacceptable in some cases by the countries that were once such republics, by non-governmental organizations and by people. So this is some painful collision, a dichotomy that happens in the minds of those people. As I have already said, regularly said, there is a hunt against the clergy, against clergymen, including the mobilization of the armed forces. Moreover, the Kiev regime is already degenerating into a terrorist organization, committing numerous crimes against Russian civilians, residents of the Belgorod, Bryansk, Zaporozhye, Kursk, Kherson regions, Donetsk and Lugansk. They are all targets of the terrorist regime. It is not surprising that the use of the widest range of repressive measures against a significant number of the population is necessary for the Ukrainian administration, presidential administration, as the only and most reliable way to retain power. For them, it is important to continue the war, maintain a high degree of escalation, and ending all of this, establishing peace, will lead to the fall of the Kiev regime, to their need to explain their crimes and unfulfilled promises and even corruptions of these promises. But for them, apparently, it is more important to keep power than to have peace and to keep the lives of people. And we can see their attitude to both living people and those who are dead. It should be noted that numerous reports of terrorist and war crimes committed by Kiev regime against the civilian population of Donbass and Ukraine are not included in this report. In Russia's we can say that since 2014 there have been crimes that have been registered by the law enforcement agencies in Russia. The investigative committee of the Russian Federation, several thousand criminal cases have been opened and are under investigation. About 500 members of Ukrainian armed formations have already been sentenced to long terms of imprisonment, including life imprisonment. And Russians will. So I would like to say that I have already announced specific activity that will deal with all these questions and with the Nazi essence of the Kiev regime. So data about their crimes are included in a specific analytical materials. So we have also highlighted that the obliging readiness of Zelensky to move the country along the path of self-destruction to the detriment of the interests of his own people, creating Russophobic anti-Russia project out of it. That is the reason why foreign curators turn a blind eye to the neo-Nazi essence of the Kiev regime, and history knows many similar examples of West's connivance with openly racist regimes. The Second World War is one of the most speaking examples, but how many examples did we see after the Second World War? And another issue, the issue related to children. based on the second round of negotiations in Istanbul. Following the results of the second round, a draft statement by the chairman of the Security Council on Children in the context of the Ukrainian crisis was submitted to the United Nations Security Council for consideration at the initiative of Russia. And the document welcomed the Russian side's readiness to carefully study the list of 339 Ukrainian children handed over by Kiev, who, due to various circumstances, had lost contact with their relatives and legal representatives, and to take measures to restore family ties. It noted Russia's intention to organize the process in the most transparent manner possible. And Kiev was called upon to cooperate in good faith with the Russian side on this issue. So it seemed that everything was included in the draft. But contrary to common sense and despite the obvious humanitarian nature of the initiative, the Western members of the Security Council, UK, Greece, Denmark, Slovakia, France, South Korea, decided to effectively block the adoption of the document. They included some politicized formulations in it and record all of these things and turned the humanitarian project that was about the fate of children into some politicized story. And it was clear that, of course, no one cares about children on the side of the West anymore. And Russia had no other choice but to stop its work on this document. And this is yet another evidence of the blatant double standards of the Kiev regime's masters, who continue to spread the myths about thousands of kidnapped and forcibly displaced Ukrainian children, even when the documents handed over to us by them say the opposite. So the world has seen once again how this humanitarian topic is transforming in front of everyone's eyes just into an element of anti-Russian propaganda and Russophobia. I'm not going to go into depth about many things we have already discussed today, but it is clear, there is no doubt that no one actually really cares about children. This is all just a politicized tool. Russia has never interfered and will never interfere with the maintenance of contacts and communication of children with their relatives and loved ones. There is not a single example of us acting otherwise. We sincerely strive for the reunification, and there is not a single example of us interfering with this. We sincerely strive for the reunification and will continue to do so. Just an example, 5 years ago, the time of pandemic and lockdowns, our ministry and the whole country has been active in helping with moving Russian citizens, and Ukrainian citizens came to us requesting us to take them on board Russian planes to go back to their home country via Russian territory. What did they say? And we have evidence. They went to Ukrainian diplomats, Ukrainian embassies requesting help with reaching Ukraine via Russia's assistance, and it was available at that time, while Ukrainian diplomatic missions actually denied this assistance to Ukrainian citizens, including socially underprivileged groups, vulnerable groups. So this is what all of this is about. And another example, Russia's initiative with the initiative regarding the adoption of UN Security Council resolution in connection with the terrorist attacks carried out with the Kiev regime.
Среди членов Совбеза он был распространен, и построен он был на апробированных для подобных документов формулировках. Решительно осуждались теракты, диверсии, другие акты международного терроризма, которые несут угрозу миру, безопасности на планете. Выражалось глубокое сочувствие жертвам, пострадавшим, соболезнования родственникам погибшим. Государственным членам был адресован призыв совместными усилиями привлечь к ответственности исполнителей, организаторов, спонсоров этих преступлений. Вот что могло пойти не так? И пошло не так опять, потому что западные члены Совета Безопасности ООН отказались от работы над документом. Опять же, под надуманным предлогом. Не буду говорить как, я думаю, что вы следили за дискуссией и вокруг этого вопроса. Российская страна проявляла и гибкость, предложила вместо резолюции принять заявление для прессы аналогичного содержания, ну, чтобы не буксовала работа. И это начинание натолкнулось на такой же подход, на противодействие западников, которые единым фронтом выступили против. Снова себя дискредитировали, теперь уже публично показывают всем свою ангажированность. Вроде много десятилетий были против международного терроризма и терроризма как явления. Теперь все опять не видят, не замечают, не понимают. Подоплека, конечно, их очевидна. Ни у кого не вызывает сомнений, что следы бесчеловечных варварских терактов на российской территории ведут на Банковую. Европейские спонсоры укрбандеровцев еще с 2014 года и закрывали глаза на любые, даже самые жестокие зверства киевской хунты. Во многих терактах непосредственно принимали участие, как, например, британцы. И сейчас используют киевский режим как свой инструментарий, ни в коем случае не отрицая террористической сути, я имею в виду не гнушаясь и не пытаясь даже как-то отмежеваться от террористических актов. Ни одного слова осуждения. Терроризму, на самом деле, не может быть никакого оправдания. И поэтому мы настоятельно призываем всех ответственных членов международного сообщества дать должную оценку произошедшему, не допускать попустительства киевскому режиму, который сделал ставку на террор. Вот ситуация в Молдавии. Внимательно следим за тем, что там происходит. Правящие элиты продолжают.
And now let's talk about the situation in Moldavia. We can see the actions of the ruling elite. We're closely following the development of the situation in Moldova. Its ruling elites continue to consistently destroy the spiritual and moral foundations of Moldovan society by forcibly imposing neoliberal values and revisionist views. And sometimes it feels that it cannot be worse. Just calling their name Romanian and describing their citizens as Romanians. Only that could be worse. But no, all the time there is something even worse and even more knocks from below the bottom of democracy. On June the 15th, we know that there was a peaceful rally in defense of traditional values in the family. What could go wrong? About 10,000 people went out to protect traditional values, and the security forces attacked an Orthodox priest. There was brutal detention of a man holding a child in his arms, and the pro-government Moldovan media turned the situation inside out and presented all of this as if the clergy themselves were trying to break through the police lines with icons in their hands. And in an official statement, the Moldovan authority claims with hypocrisy that the clashes were allegedly coordinated from the outside, and in the comments to numerous videos of this incident, viewers wrote that the brutal actions of the police demonstrate moral degradation of the authorities, the result of the politicization and the opposition forces called the incident a planned action by the authorities to intimidate the people in the run-up to parliamentary elections, and announced the initiation of a parliamentary investigation into the actions of the Interior Ministry staff. So what was behind, what was the reason for the police violence? It's simple. On that same day, a so-called LGBT parade was held in the capital, and its participants were thoroughly protected from citizens who adhere to traditional views. Despite the ban of the municipal authority to hold this coven, the patronage of the president and the ruling party, as well as the embassies of Western countries, allowed a few local activists to freely pass through the central streets of Chisinau. It also showed the true priorities of the current Moldovan authorities, for whom demonstrating their commitment to the notorious European values to their sponsors was much more important than the opinion of the overwhelming majority of the country's residents who adhere to traditional views. 95% of the population profess orthodoxy. So in line with the dominant trends in Europe today, official Chisinau consistently supports initiatives aimed at the de facto whitewashing Nazism, turning the Republic into a pantheon of Hitler's allies. And another action to glorify the soldiers of Nazi Romania who died during the invasion of the Soviet Union in summer of 1941 took place on the 4th of June in the village of Stoyanovka, Kantemir district. The ceremony was held with full military honors, how it was carried may seem, with even the participation of the military orchestra of the Ministry of Defense. The representatives of the Bessarabian Archdiocese, and another memorial is being prepared to open in honor of the Roman so-called heroes who are actually occupiers from Antonescu's army who ingloriously ended their activity on Soviet soil. Criminals. A direct consequence of the attempts to revive Nazism in modern Moldova is that statements actually soaked in ethnic hatred are increasingly broadcast on local TV. June the 12th, political scientist, former MP, former Moldovan ambassador, Anatol Zarano spoke. He called, and I should quote this, and I quote, a low-quality ethnic part of the population. End of quote. What is this, if not neo-Nazism and segregation of people based on nationality? He mentioned that about Russian-speaking Moldovans. Where is the reaction of the Moldovan authorities, who seem to adhere to European values? Not even legal assessment was given, either by law enforcement agencies or policymakers, and I don't expect any reaction to come. So, given all the above, the trend towards a catastrophic depopulation of Moldova is not surprising. During Sanders' term, which is not decades, during this period of time, the population declined by about 10%. Quite an impressive figure, given there were no major hurricanes, natural disasters, typhoons, or volcanic eruptions, or military action. Nothing of this kind. Fortunately, Moldovans are somehow immune to these actions, and they have already developed this immunity against violent political indoctrination. They realize the abyss their country will find itself in if it continues to mindlessly follow such attitudes. I think the regime will not succeed. And now, 17th of June, and let's talk about the plans to stop importing Russian oil, Russian energy resources.
Отличающийся большей стабильностью и предсказуемостью, сегодня все наоборот. Документ призван заложить законодательную основу для прекращения Европейским Союзом газовых поставок из России. По новым контрактам с 1 января 2026 по действующим краткосрочным контрактам с 17 июня 2026 года, а по долгосрочным с 1 января 2028 года. Возникает вопрос, ну не хотите покупать, так не покупайте. Зачем вот эта вся какая-то катавасия? А я напомню, вот, например, переговоры мирные Украине запретили же вести, в том числе закрепив запрет законодательно. Так и здесь. Ну, нормальное общество, государство, компания не захочет покупать, не будет. Но если поменяется конъюнктура на рынке, если вдруг окажется компания, государство, сообщество перед лицом каких-то чрезвычайных обстоятельств, у них будет возможность вернуться к этому вопросу. Зачем же принимать законодательство на этот счет? Это же не только странно, это уже безумно. А просто тем самым Брюссель продолжает курс на полное сворачивание энергосотрудничества с нашей страной. В своем стремлении придать конфронтации и разрыву с Россией буквально необратимый характер, в Брюсселе совершенно утратили связь с реальностью. Они не задают вопрос, нужно ли это населению их стран. Нет, они диктуют волю людям, компаниям и бизнесу, вне зависимости от того, насколько это соответствует здравому смыслу. Настолько, что даже не в состоянии обосновать необходимость предложенных для принятия мер, не прибегая для этого к откровенному передергиванию фактов и подмене понятий. Вот судите сами. Просто я несколько примеров вам приведу. Профильный еврокомиссар Дан Йоргенсен заявляет, что импорт России...
The relevant European Commissioner Dan Jorgensen states that the import of Russian gas is a threat to European security and vows not to leave any of the EU member states without energy. It is clear that stable and economically profitable supplies of energy resources from our country naturally have never threatened anyone, but on the contrary have been the key to Europe's long-term economic well-being. And it was always the case, even during the Cold War, nobody denied Russian oil and gas. Nobody made up any stories about a mythical threat from Russian oil and gas. They actually contributed to the success and prosperity of European states. And right now, they're making up stories instead of thinking about the huge gaps in their budget as a result of their decisions. Maybe there is energy in the European market from other suppliers, but how much does it cost? Another example of such verbal balancing act is the assertion that the less money is spent on Russian energy resources, the more funds the EU will have to invest in green projects on its territory. But don't forget that they already reopening their coal mines. In reality, by ceasing to buy Russian gas, the EU will not save money, but on the contrary will spend huge sums to replace it. And everybody knows this, experts, scientists, economists. They will have to allocate more funds to buy different source of energy, could be renewable energy or something else. The European Commission also claims that the cessation of Russian gas imports will allegedly not lead to significant economic consequences and risks of supply disruptions. Apparently, the inevitable economic and production decline, deindustrialization and worsening energy poverty for the EU in such a case are viewed by European officials as insignificant. in the fight against the Russian threat. In the same spirit are the explanations that the complete refusal of Russian oil, which should also take place by the end of 2027, is unlikely to have a significant impact on oil prices and global markets. Look, they are happy to tell you how much money they will save, but at the same time they say that these changes are insignificant and will not influence anything. These are just facts that are not adding up at all. Sounds like bipolar disorder. Against the backdrop of the confidence declared by Eurocrats, it is noteworthy that the regulation does provide for the possibility of a temporary non-application of the ban on imports of Russian gas in the event of some sudden and serious circumstances that threaten the continuity of supplies to one or more EU member states. I'm sorry, you said that the only threat is a Russian threat. So what kind of problems could you have other than Russia? Remember how Zelensky was first pressured by the US and UK to stop any negotiations, but then 3 years later he was asked that how if you did not allow yourself to have any negotiations, why are your representatives in Turkey right now? Then Zelensky said that I did not refuse myself anything. So in the same way, the European colleagues think that if something goes wrong, then things can be reversed. But that shows that Europe is not a reliable partner, consumer, and that they cannot provide any predictability of their legal base and any consumer relations with other third parties. They can also not really seem to respect commercial secrets, and this shows that it's very difficult to deal with them. The cynicism of the strategy chosen by the European Commission to push through its destructive energy program is striking. In an attempt to bypass the veto of the European capitals, many of which are well aware of the suicidal nature of the energy policy imposed by the Brussels bureaucracy, a decision was made to develop a type of regulatory act that would require only a qualified majority to be adopted. Excuse me, so what is wrong with the European solidarity? At the same time, the provisions of this document will have to be implemented by the European capitals themselves, who are expected to develop specific action plans. In the event of failure, the European Commission will calmly wash its hands off it, and all the negative consequences will have to be borne by the member countries and their leadership. But in reality, not their leadership. It's the citizens who will have to deal with the negative consequences. So the actual victims, which is already a tradition, will be common citizens of Europe, whose opinion Ursula von der Leyen and her team prefer to demonstratively disregard.
И я хотела бы сказать несколько слов о той какой-то страшной, сумасшедшей.
I would also like to say a few words about the crazy information war that is on the rise in the UK. It's a real murder mystery. Agatha Christie would be jealous. So over the past few months, the British leadership has been stubbornly whipping up anti-Russian hysteria. It's the purpose of which is obvious: to create a new, renewed toxic image of Russia in society and exploit the artificially created image of the enemy, and to blame any internal problems on Russia's malicious actions. So For that reason, they launched a new episode of Russia spy drama. The most recent one concerns the arson attacks in London between May 8th and May 12th of this year on two properties and a car previously used by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The case is being handled by the London Police Counter-Terrorism Department. 3 suspects have been detained, 2 Ukrainians and 1 Russian, or rather Romanian. Possible theories include personal animosity, terrorism, Islamic extremism, and the action of a hostile state. The latter point was picked up by most British media outlets and put in the headlines as a virtually confirmed fact. According to the Financial Times, law enforcement agencies are investigating whether the arsonists were recruited by Russian intelligence services. The UK Strategic Defence Review, published by Keir Starmer on June this year, confirms this fixation on Russia's threat. The incident with the Prime Minister's property by the British media fits perfectly into the context of 2 other anti-Russian performances. On May the 12th this year, the Criminal Court of England and Wales sentenced a group of Bulgarian citizens accused of spying for Russia. On June the 4th of this year, hearings began on the case of the arson, or rather an arson, not in relation to the aforementioned arsons, but of London warehouses with Starlink equipment intended for Kiev, which was allegedly organized on the instructions of the Russian special services. During his speech in Parliament, Keir Starmer called it an attack on all of us, on British values and democracy. That's one detail completely deprives this already dubious media product of intrigue. The fact is that British authorities officially brought charges against Russia for involvement in the criminal episode with the warehouses just a month after the arson, at the end of April 2024. So quick, these insinuations were then immediately disseminated through the central British media, and then, without waiting for the trial and investigation, London initiated a confrontation and undermining the channels of dialogue between our countries. Our attaché was sent out of the UK back then, and of course this and all subsequent unfriendly steps based on the principle of reciprocity were followed by proportionate responses from the Russian side, and these measures are still felt by both countries. Our embassy in London then stated that by demanding an explanation from Moscow regarding an alleged connection of the suspects with the Russian state discovered by local security forces, the British side was deliberately anticipating the results of its own judicial proceedings. It looks like the English side already knew the results of the court proceedings ahead of time. Already in April 2024, they did it without any court ruling. So I have one question. Why do they need the court at all? They already decided everything 1 year ago. They took all the measures necessary. They already appointed perpetrators. They publicly announced these perpetrators. Why do you need any court hearings right now? Because it undermines the last pitch of trust that people had in the English or rather British court system. So
это все при том, не комментировать.
At the same time, the authorities say that they want to refrain from any claims in order to not stop the the court hearings. But when any sort of problems arise in the case, then the authorities will make sure to make juries believe in their righteousness, and they will still make Moscow and Kremlin the perpetrators of it all. It's just another case of blatant cynicism. Okay, let's now look at another case from Northern Europe. There were plans to create in Tromsø in Norway a new institute that will be tasked with researching events in the border regions of Russia, as well as interactions with BRICS and China. The Barents Institute, a research organization located in Kirkenes, whose focus is also on Russia and the border region, is also planned to be connected to the new specialized structure. Russia and Norway have always paid attention to research on northern issues, bilateral and interregional cooperation in this area. It is not surprising that a competence center for Russia is being created on the basis of the Arctic University. Close interaction with our country has been conducted by this institution since the early 1990s and was one of the priority areas of its work. Dozens of Russian universities were among the partners for this university. Course internships and student exchanges were conducted within the framework of academic mobility programs. But at the moment, all bilateral contacts in the sphere of science and education, including through the Arctic University, have been suspended at the initiative of the Norwegian side. The academic and scientific community of Norway has become a conductor of confrontational attitudes dictated from outside. And the majority of specialists specializing in Russian topics have become ardent Russophobes whose interest in the topic of Russia boils down to the desire to denigrate our country by any means necessary. Experts expressing an alternative point of view are marginalized and ostracized. So our question is what the center is going to be doing if any scientific contacts are blocked. We do not see any possibility that the center being created will justify its name and really contribute to peace and security, or a more adequate and objective perception of the geopolitical situation in Norway, rather than less understanding between the peoples of our countries. If they wanted to actually develop and build bridges, then they wouldn't tear the links we had. So another statement by the Denmark.
So the anti-Russian statement of Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, it actually even is beyond Russophobia. This happened on the 12th of June. The Prime Minister produced a whole panoply of hackneyed propaganda cliches accusing Russia as usual of all mortal sins. I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of them include aggression, committing sabotage and attacks on critical infrastructure. And while missiles are being launched against nuclear sites, given us, bearing this in mind, we can see that they pretend they do not see anything, do not observe anything. They turn a blind eye to things that are happening. And on the 12th of June, Russia's day, we can see very outward statements. Of course, there is no other reason for that. And of course, the head of the Danish government didn't bother to produce any evidence of our country's malicious intrigues, nor did she make any attempts to analyze what has caused this profound crisis of security, international security. So what do I imply here? Why is it so important to comment on that? For us, these biased accusations sounded especially blasphemous given the location, the venue where the event took place. In May 1945, it was the Red Army soldiers who liberated the Danish island of Bornholm from the fascist Nazi invaders. So, judging by the foreign policy steps of Denmark and its allies, there is no doubt about who are the actual culprits in the destabilization of the international affairs. It is significant that literally the day before, on the 11th of June, the Danish parliament ratified an agreement on collaboration in defense with the United States, which for the first time authorizes the United States to permanently station armed forces on Danish territory. It substantially increases the risks of deploying nuclear weapons in the country, contrary to its obligations voluntarily accepted by the Danish side to prevent the presence on its territory. I would like to remind you that Denmark has demonstrated a total lack of interest in conducting a full-fledged investigation into terrorist attacks on the Nord Streams and identifying the true customers. It was not interested in who were the perpetrators, the customers of this crime. By providing massive assistance to Ukrainian Nazis and being one of the largest donors of weapons to the armed forces of Ukraine, Copenhagen is provoking further escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, an increase in the number of casualties and scale of destruction, and pushes Kiev to commit new war crimes against civilians. So it feeds the terrorist group on its own continent. We can see what it means in terms of security and stability. All this indisputably demonstrates Denmark's unwillingness to contribute to global stability and predictability. Instead, Copenhagen prefers blatant accusatory rhetoric. And now about Kazakhstan.
On June the 14th, the Atomic Energy Agency of the Republic of Kazakhstan officially announced the selection of the State Atomic Energy Corporation Rosatom as the leader of the international consortium for the construction of the first nuclear power plant in the Central Asian state. Our company's proposal was recognized as the best and most advantageous. The Russian side expresses gratitude to its Kazakh partners for the decision taken. We consider this event as further evidence of the progressive development of strong allied relations between Russia and Kazakhstan. We are ready to professionally fulfill our obligations within the framework of this strategic project aimed at strengthening the energy security of our closest neighbor. Specialists from both countries are already conducting intensive negotiations. We are prepared to train qualified national personnel. We're talking about the creation of a new fully fledged branch of the Kazakh industry, which will give a powerful impetus to the development of the economy of this republic. It is important that today Rosatom is the only company in the world market that, firstly, simultaneously builds 22 power units abroad, and secondly, has experience in integrating equipment from foreign suppliers into its projects. The Russian State Corporation has the necessary competence to implement all stages of a project to build a nuclear power plant that meets modern technological requirements.
А вот 16 июня состоялась церемония закладки первого камня на месте строительства завода по переработке золота в районе аэропорта столицы Мали Бамако. После ввода в эксплуатацию он будет управляться совместным предприятием с участием правительства страны и российской группы компании «Ядран». Мощность составляет до 200 тонн драгметалла в год. Проект будет одним из первых реализуемых в регионе крупных промышленных объектов. Он позволит существенно увеличить доходность горнодобывающего сектора Мали. В перспективе
orchestra. The conductor was the chair of the jury, people's popular artist Valery Gergiev. The contest involved 65 musicians from Russia, China, and other foreign countries, Belarus, Kazakhstan, European countries, Spain, Romania, UK, Slovenia, Republic of Korea, Ecuador, Japan, and jury members are representatives of 15 foreign countries. So it's just hello to you from the very epicenter of the isolation. So you can see broadcasts, and you are welcome to watch wonderful performances. You will find the links in the briefings text. Moreover, I would like to remind you of RTEC, International Center RTEC celebrated 100th anniversary, and to mark this occasion we would like to join numerous congratulations coming from across the globe. For my mother in particular, it is a specific date, an occasion when she can remember, and many other people can remember, many wonderful moments on the coast of the Black Sea among our citizens. Children at that time, RTEC celebrated with great scale this event with a whole number of festivals. Children's Summit RTEC Dialogue for the name of Peace and Development took place, which featured more than 300 activists from 30 countries of the globe. And on the internet you can find a lot of updates on these events. There was also a number of activities that are described on the website of our ministry, and as part of our forum there are also some activities marking these events. I would like to give the floor to the audience now for some questions. Good afternoon, good evening. This week in Latvia, the detained member of the Sejm, Alexei Roslikov, who gave an emotional speech during the session of the Latvian parliament to defend Russian language. He was set free, but providing that he can't leave. But before that, he was accused of cooperating with Russia and acting against Latvia and fanning the flames of hatred, national hatred. Can you comment on that? It is a monstrous, terrible situation. If you don't know, let me remind you, but I think almost everyone knows what's happened. This is yet another attempt of Latvia's authorities to bring to accountability member of the parliament, Alexei Roslikov. For what? Just for the fact that he openly advocated the preservation, the protection of the language that is mother tongue to a lot of people. More than 1/3 of the population of Latvia is speak this language. It is a blatant violation of human rights, including the provision of the Universal Human Rights Declaration, International Pact on Civil Rights, and other instruments, other documents. It is, I don't know, I can't even find the right word. It is racism 2.0. We haven't reached that point yet. I know many manifestations of racism and fascism. We have seen many manifestations, but when people are banned, they are not allowed to speak their mother tongue, and when systemic programs are introduced to ban this, I can't remember any cases. This is an extreme case, and this case requires the involvement of international authorities. They can't turn a blind eye. They can't stay silent. They can't be strategically silent. If they cherish their reputation, I'm not even speaking about conscientiousness, they get money for their work. They have to. They are obliged to speak out. Russia condemns such cases in the Baltic region, repressions against compatriots who try to protect and advocate the protection of their mother tongue. It is nothing artificially incorporated. It is not a sort of a gender that is imposed on children. It is mother tongue. It is the tongue, the language that has been spoken by many generations of families who lived there and worked for the benefit of this particular country and this particular people. Any other questions? Regrettably, interpreters cannot interpret because no microphone is used.
Оказать давление на Сербию, чтобы она нормализовала отношения с Косово.
Please use the microphone.
Вы знаете, разрешите, я напомню, что так называемая Республика Косово.
Regrettably, interpreters only heard the answer. So we remember 1999. We remember NATO operation. NATO involvement, rather. We remember the involvement of the United States, and we can see the Kosovo project being sponsored by Brussels, by other countries who want to just rip off this part of Serbia, who turn blind eye to the sabotage and all of this has been confirmed, has been given evidence. We can see pressure on Belgrade. Belgrade has long shown that it is sincere in its intentions, that it is ready to cooperate, to negotiate by Pristina and its role in the UN, the fact that it is not present in the UN, all of this actually causes discontent of the West. I think it's no use putting pressure on Belgrade in this sense, because they don't understand. They think that they will thus transform the political approach of Serbia by affecting policy makers. But for Serbia, it is not a political approach. It is an existential question. The very gist, the very cultural code, the very history is something that shapes historically the people. So I think one shouldn't put pressure on Belgrade, but if they want to affect someone, they need to affect Kosovars. And Kosovo should collaborate with Serbia in terms of reaching agreements. There is a lot of work to be done here, according to the resolution 1244. We know there is an instrument that serves as legal basis, and we should rely on it. Ria Novosti, please. There are still questions we didn't cover yesterday, right? Please use the microphone, otherwise interpreters cannot interpret the question. Now it works. I broke it and I fixed it. It's erased from a film. Yes, we recalled films. Two questions. One question. Well, I have a very particularly good memory, and I remember bad things very well. So how could you comment on Yerevan's statements about the impossibility of being present in European Union and Eurasian Economic Union? you can't be present in both structures at the same time. Well, let's look into details. Yes, it is incompatible if the country joins the European Union and it is in the Eurasian Economic Union. And I think Russian side has already provided arguments on that. It is clear that the real advantages that Eurasian integration brings to Yerevan and Armenians is actually incompatible with the promises that Brussels is giving them. In Eurasian integration, you can see specific numbers and specific figures, and you can at the same time understand that there may be deceit in the other case. We know that the process itself can long for decades, and it is not clear whether Armenia is anticipated in the European Union and whether it is considered or not as a geopolitical tool, because this is how European Union played with a number of other countries. As soon as they lose interest, if some circumstances change, then any hypothetical responsibility for unfulfilled promises will be removed. Europeization, and here we can mention Ukraine and Moldova. We can see that their way towards this process has not led them to anywhere specific, to any specific point. They lost their own effort, they wasted their resources, and Yerevan will lose the opportunity to move barrier-free its goods in the Eurasian space. Customs tariffs will increase, and prices for Armenian consumers will soar. Armenia will lose Eurasian advantages in terms of labor migration, technical regulation, sanitary measures, and other directions that fall under the competence of the Eurasian Economic Union. So that's it. I think we should provide more detailed information about why this is so that it's not too late, so that the people of Armenia do not ask why they were not explained all of this before. And the second question.
I would like to ask you to comment on the 10th round of human rights dialogue between EU and Ukraine that just took place in Kiev. I think that's just a joke, to be honest. Where are those human rights being followed, being respected? They completely destroyed. They should be held in a dialogue how to joke around with human rights in Ukraine. But they see this as a key stone in integrating Ukraine into Europe, and because Europe imposes on Ukraine an obligation to respect human rights, including minorities. But what do we have in reality? This format has been transformed into unequivocal support of European partners of the Kievan regime, and Ukraine has been less and less interesting for Brussels, and what they do is just criticize the Russian course. Do you think that if there was an actual dialogue of the sort, could Kiev not retrieve the bodies of their own soldiers, just decide to leave them? Which state would be allowed to conduct such actions and to address human rights in such a way? This time, European authorities and bureaucrats were concerned with the rights of who, do you think? War prisoners, the dead, wounded, their families. No, sex minorities. That is the main topic of the agenda of this dialogue. And of course, the formal correspondence of the Ukrainian legislation with the human rights principles of the EU. And that sounds like a satanic joke. Of course, what kind of freedom of religion can we be talking about if they divide the Christian priests into two groups, those who should be mobilized just because their organization is called one way, and those who are immune to such mobilization because they have a different name. And if they change their name, then they will also be immune. So there are no condemnation of the horrible situation with human rights, no condemnation of the crimes against humanity conducted by the Kiev regime. Nothing. Brussels closed their eyes once again to the situation with the rights of the Russian speakers in Ukraine and de-Russification of the country. They also did not notice the violations against other minorities, ethnic minorities. They totally ignored neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism in Ukraine, the repression of any thought, any opposition. In the West, usually the advocates of human rights had to talk about the freedom of speech and what is the situation with freedom of speech in Ukraine like. The democratization efforts of Zelensky of human rights and main freedoms are mentioned in all of our reports, or rather some of them, actually are more like the lack of any freedoms in Ukraine. And we have been conducting this research and reports together with Belarus in the past years, and you can find links in the text of our briefing to these reports. Everything that worries the EU in their dialogue with third countries is not mentioned here. There is no hysteria, there are no homeless people or disenfranchised communities, nothing. Ukraine was not blamed for anything. So this another round of this dialogue is just another case of hypocrisy, both on the side of our European colleagues and the Kiev regime. This blatant hypocrisy and the very hypocritical attitude to human rights on the part of the West is apparently a civilizational achievement of Western countries. These norms are not being followed in the West. They use the human rights as another instrument of their politics. But this is not a new thing. They had slave trade, all sorts of discrimination, witch hunt, and even only 70 years ago there were human zoos when children and grown-ups of different skin color were showed in cages, and they organized improvised human parks. It's like human equivalent of zoos. And there are facts, evidence of that. Okay, another question, please. Next. Good afternoon. Just recently, a member of the Italian channel RAI wrote that it's enough to make one targeted air strike on Kremlin to destroy Putin. RAI is accredited in Russia, but there was still no comment on these words. Do you have a comment? Yes. My first wish was to double check. Maybe his account was hacked, but it turned out to be true. But the post was deleted a few hours after it was published because of the amount of criticism in the comments. I think they maybe became either embarrassed or scared, so they decided to delete this post. But we don't think that this is the end of this incident. We can qualify it as a crime and as public incitement of extremist activity or terrorist activity, public justification of terrorism or terrorist propaganda. And the fact that these statements were made by a representative of Italian state media outlet shows that the situation with the freedom of speech in Italy has reached some frightening stage. And some media representatives also, or rather even establishment representatives, have lost touch with reality. They stopped seeing repercussions of their own words. They stopped respecting the law. And you can not like or love somebody. You can have different political opinions, but you know that law is law. And there is a famous film that we love with a similar name, and we of course expect some commentary from this media outlet, but we also would like Italian officials to make statements to say that this sort of careless attitude towards is not a norm in Italy. But my issue with this is that maybe Italian officials set the tone of this lack of responsibility. I will quote another article. I didn't believe it was true at first. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, expressed an opinion that Iran should see a change of power through the overturn of the current regime by the Iranian people. She claimed that she had always believed that Iran would have been so much better off with a turnover of the current regime by the Iranian people. So, what are the reasons that the leader of Italy is talking about a turn, an overthrow of a regime in a different sovereign state? Was she asked for some sort of authoritative action, or does she have any connection to Iran, to its history? Is she a deputy of the Iranian people? What grounds does she have to make such claims? And she is not not just lacking any grounds for the statements, but I would like to remind you that in 1965 the General Assembly of the UN adopted a resolution that that enabled the declaration of the inacceptability of involvement in the matters of other sovereign states. And of course, this resolution is not binding, but it was adopted by 109 members, and just one abstained. It was the UK. Of course, the UK would not adopt any resolution that contains its own actions, but Italy was a member state that did adopt this resolution. Apparently, the current leader of Italy did not think about how her own country voted in this declaration. Maybe Italy should express the change in their mindset. If Italy has changed its opinion and they don't want to follow this resolution anymore, they should have come up with this statement to that effect. She should respect her predecessors, who were experts in what they were doing. They were creating benefits and value for their own citizens. They were building the grounds for the achievements of the country, and she shows an utter disrespect without any authority to say such things. Italy had, as I say, adopted these resolutions, and her words are to the contrary to this resolution. And right now, a whole series of Western countries are talking about acceptability for them to dictate other countries how they should be overthrowing their regimes. I think everybody should read the resolution, which is a very thorough document. It includes such subjects as going into detail, researching about the inner policies of other countries. I would like to say that this is not the first time that this subject has been discussed, and when I hear people like Italian Prime Minister saying something like this, saying what other countries should be doing with their regimes, I would like to say that these politicians should actually study and self-educate. I'm really sorry that my answer is not so brief, but I think my answer is something that I want to express my surprise that journalists and politicians say such things. Anything else? Next question.
Margherita Furlan, Italy. I worked so many years with Giulietto Chiesa, and until the last days, and now I am the only Italian journalist that presented at Kazan at the forum BRICS the last October. And now I would like to give you as a present my book on Kazan about BRICS, and I would like to ask you what is the future for the BRICS now with the escalation in Iran.
Future of BRICS?
Yes.
According to the escalation in the Middle East?
Yes.
Какое будущее БРИКС в связи с эскалацией ситуации на Ближнем Востоке?
So the future of BRICS, given the escalation in the Middle East, I think that the global majority, if it hasn't shown the will to unite and to resist the imposement of the will of the minority, then such escalations would see no end, and they would all end in some tragic outcomes. But the majority so far is doing all they can so as to de-escalate the situation. We see that BRICS member countries, similarly to Russia, but using different formats, they move in the same direction. So we do not talk about the future of BRICS. We need to talk about how BRICS is already reacting to such challenges. So that's why I have no doubt at all that BRICS per se and other groups based on the principle of multipolarity will continue to thrive. It was BRIC at first, then it became BRICS, then it became an extended version of BRICS. It all lives, it all takes different forms, and different decisions will be made. It is really living, animate, not an artificial structure, which has very living objectives, and by going through different obstacles, it will become stronger because its initial goals were noble and not destructive, not aggressive. Let's move on. Please introduce yourself. Maria Vladimirovna, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. I'm from Spanish Latin American editorial of Sputnik. In St. Petersburg at this forum we see great presence of Middle East and Global East and Global South, Caribbean countries and Latin American countries. How would you explain the interest of the countries in terms of the Global South in terms of business contacts with Russia? Apart from traditional links and amicable relationships and contacts, they see open opportunities, they see an ample potential, and the opportunities have been opened up. Businesses of the European Union have been partially withdrawn. Some of them have stayed, but some of them have stayed, but others have left. There are ample opportunities. They have the way forward, and they see commercial profit. They see prospects. They see resources available. Why lose this opportunity? Why lose this profit? Dependence on a relationship and collaboration with just one pole, with one side, will not provide them with stability, and they rather know what dependence is. Some of them have gone through occupation, colonization, and intervention. They know what it means to be dependent, and they want to be truly independent and build independent relations. One of opportunities to do so is to use diversification by building relationship with friendly countries. They don't abuse them, they don't use them as a tool, but to develop equal relationship. So we could discuss many things, but I would focus on this one. And one more question. Maria Vladimirovna, thank you very much. Yura Leonov, Lenta.ru. We have one question. Vladimir Zelensky has repeatedly spoken about intentions to discuss with Donald Trump the purchase of a package of equipment, and they plan to discuss this initially as part of G7. What does Moscow think about this in terms of draft memorandum and provision on non-admissibility of delivery of equipment, military equipment to Ukraine? Well, Zelensky is a rich man. He can allow himself to discuss the purchase of a package of military equipment for the armed forces. Probably he's using his own money. Probably he has sold off his villas, one of his villas, or probably has sold his one of his organs. I don't know which organ of his is healthy, given the doses. So I want to ask a question. All of this property that was earned through corruption, through some dirtiness, through schemes, some plots, probably he would want to use part of this property of his to spend it to buy equipment. Who will pay for this? The lives of people will be wasted. Those people who are in debt, who will pay for this? Those people who can't live in a normal state because the economy is demolished, is damaged, education and science has been damaged. All of this is moving within the framework of neo-Nazi ideology, which is a way nowhere. This way can provide some instantaneous effect, but we understand that nationalism leads to deadlock. So whose money will be squandered, whose money will be wasted? Because it's all about credits, it's all about assistance that will have to be repaid. We know what Western support is about. So as for Lend-Lease, they have paid off recently, and there were different estimates. We are always grateful to the help, but we know that it all costs money, and it was all paid for. But just imagine the sums, just imagine the burden in terms of the future of Ukraine that the Kievan regime undertook. It's a whole burden for the people. That's one point. As far as his announcements and comments are concerned, I think that we should consider them not from the point of view of memorandum, but from the point of what is most important, and that is that he doesn't want peace. He wants to see decay ongoing. He wants to keep pumping money for himself, for those around him, but no way. He doesn't want peace. It will stand in his way. And he's not interested in his own people's destiny. Of course, this is done at the instruction of Western sponsors. So I don't think we need to make a link to the memorandum here. Our position is definite. We use official channels, substantive contacts. Istanbul talks, we have reached some agreements and we adhere to them and we stimulate them to deliver to. After 22nd, the date will be announced of the new round. So these are the contacts that we are focusing on, and not on historical words by Zelensky that have been paid for by Westerners and that are part of this corruptive money schemes, money flows.
Let's take a few questions from our online audience, and for example, Media Corporation of China. Maria Vladimirovna, good afternoon. This year we use Chinese cars at the forum. How do you assess the Chinese car industry and its role in Russia? Yes, we all highly assess the car industry of China, and we have joint projects in this field. We see successes of Chinese producers in Russia. But since you asked this question, it's not my specialization, but because I follow the news and I have been at this forum for 2 days now, I would like to say that as part of this forum, the successes and achievements of Russian car industry have been presented as well. A large number of new models of innovative models have been presented, including those of AvtoVAZ, for example, Lada Azimut. It was created by the engineers and technologists of AvtoVAZ. It was created for the first time by the R&D department, and also SUV Lada Travel also attracted a lot of attention. Another model, Lada Aura, it's a business sedan, is another debut. Lada Iskra Sport are two more new models. Iskra Solars, it is located in Tatarstan, also presented compact minivan, or rather it's a luxury pickup. Also new Auras models have been presented at a stand here. Also a bulletproof Commandant crossover. Another one, Auras Arsenal. So I'm really sorry for being not 100% accurate maybe, but there are sedans for civil purposes, but there is also agricultural vehicles and other vehicles. So you can celebrate our successes as well, just like we celebrate your successes. So let's all now say the words of condolences to the West, who lost this market, who lost their possibilities here. Let's not laugh at them. They lost the market and production sites, but most importantly, they lost any chance of joint scientific achievements, because joint scientific achievements and research activity means joint production, joint testing, joint personnel training, etc. They lost all of it because of their stupidity and their mistakes. You can choose what you like. Okay, is that all? Okay, REUTERS is joining us.
REUTERS, на мели.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's REUTERS. Are you with us? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I think there is no sound.
Добрый день, Мария Владимировна.
Maria Vladimirovna, our question is about Iran. Could you please outline the steps that Russia is proposing to regulate the conflicts around the Iranian nuclear program? We know that Russia offers to accept Iranian nuclear materials and to be an intermediary between the countries. What else? Is that not enough? So are there many parties who are offering more or anything at all? A lot of countries in Europe, they can't stop talking about this nuclear program of Iran. What have they been proposing, except for an overthrow of Iranian regime? We know by the example of other countries that our Western opponents are not really interested. For them, this change of regimes is a non-stop process. It's not because they don't like the current regime in a given country, but because for them it's just a standard way of thinking. They don't really think about other countries as sovereign states. So what you mentioned, our proposals that you mentioned, I think they are not so little. Moscow is constantly working to de-escalate the conflict between Iran and Israel. In the first days, as I mentioned, there was a direct phone call between our president and the whole his colleagues. Our foreign minister is also conducting talks with his colleagues, and every time they highlight the fact that Russia is an all-round supporter of regulating the situation in a peaceful way. Russia has put across a strategy to de-escalate the conflict. Russia has stressed that it is ready to play a key role and wants to be an intermediary in this de-escalation process. So I don't want to list all the events, all the negotiations that have taken place. And right now, for us, the key goal is to consolidate international forces in the face of a very rapidly approaching nuclear catastrophe that is being pushed on us by those who started this initiative. So, and I've said this many times in the past days, it really shocks you that the West media seems to be completely downplaying the nuclear threat related to this conflict. In the past 3 years, our president, our foreign ministers, and other officials, the Security Council of Russian Federation representatives, whenever they have talked about their commitment to the following of nuclear safety principles and adhering to safety and responsibility, then immediately these words were taken out of context and blown out of proportion. Just a few words were turned into headlines as if Russia is allegedly threatening the West, using its nuclear weapons, etc. We have been hearing this for 3 years. And now, in front of the entire global community, direct airstrikes are being made on facilities that are directly connected to nuclear infrastructure, peaceful atomic infrastructure, and it seems like the West, the experts and politologists, have completely forgotten such terms as nuclear safety, the threat of radioactive pollution. If it comes to any escalation, the need for immediate de-escalation and the threat of a possible escalation of this conflict into something much more nuclear related. There is nothing. They ignore the airstrikes, or rather they talk about these airstrikes, but they avoid the subject of the nuclear threat, as if there is no understanding on their side. Maybe that is just illiteracy, lack of education, as we see recently. Maybe they just don't have the actual understanding of the existing threat. We have seen how missiles change their trajectories and strike those who initiated this airstrike, etc. So what are the odds, or rather, is there a guarantee that something cannot go wrong? And this is a huge concern. It has to be for anybody who knows any basic physics, chemistry, chemical reactions, etc. In our country, our school education warns us from the early childhood of what radiation is, nuclear weapons are, radioactive technologies, etc. We know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We know about peaceful atom catastrophes in Chernobyl, for example. Our children know a lot about this, and they are really concerned and rightfully afraid of the nuclear threat. But it seems like in Europe, this subject is discussed only when it plays into their hands. But when it doesn't, then they just ignore it. I'm really horrified at these missile strikes. And I'm really watching this with horror, because any of these airstrikes can lead to the actual radioactive pollution and radioactive catastrophe. And this radioactive incident will not be localized, and it will not ask where it goes. There are no borders for radiation. So it will depend on the wind, not on politics. So it will not depend on any commands from Brussels or Washington. So it seems like they're downplaying, brushing this under the carpet. It's called strategic silence, I think. I'm really shocked. Where are all the ecologists and politologists, environmental activists? Where are all the nuclear safety specialists who always fight for disarmament? They all somehow disappeared. They're not published, they're not given an award, as if they just don't exist. Just imagine if this happened in some other country. If some other country was targeting their nuclear infrastructure. I only know one such other state, and that is the Kiev regime. They were attacking the Zaporizhia, or rather Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and that was borderline nuclear terrorism. And back then, the West again ignored this. But this time, the situation is completely unprecedented, and I'm extremely shocked. The emergency meeting of the UN Security Council and other such events showed that the parties are not satisfied with Israel's reaction and actions. They demand immediate ceasefire, especially ceasefire in terms of the nuclear infrastructure of Iran. But the West attempts to ignore it as much as possible. I think I answered your question.
Да, пожалуйста.
Yes, please.
Maria Vladimirovna,
good afternoon. Recently, the visit of Xi Jinping from China to Astana, and as part of this visit, they signed an agreement to cooperate in the field of media. They want to create an alliance to have cooperation between Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan media, and you are an expert in the global Asian agenda. So how do you think is this gonna affect the information agenda of the Global South? And does this alliance mean that China is starting to actively expand to Central Asia? Both Russia and China want to see the prosperous Central Asia because it's very important strategic, economic and cultural center of Eurasia. We are closely coordinating this process with Beijing. We also work closely with Central Asian Five, and we think that such formats are very important and effective, and they contribute to the common interests of all of our countries. I cannot share your concerns about this project. We have similar projects with Central Asian countries. Our media are concluding agreements with media of those countries and with Chinese media. So I think the problem lies somewhere else. I think for decades these countries have been reading and absorbing one source of information, which was coming from the West, and quite often these media outlets provide only one perspective, and it was also true for their own regional media, who were just transmitting just one perspective, and that should be the cause of concern. But other countries having their own regional perspectives and transmitting these perspectives through the local media outlets and wanting to cooperate with other countries, I think that's actually not any cause of concern for us. For us, Central Asia and China are our strategic partners, and we cooperate on a whole array of questions, and we believe that working in this way will help us exchange trustworthy information, and not just with our citizens, but with citizens abroad. Thank you.
Добрый день, Мария Владимировна.
Good afternoon, Ms. Dotru, Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, voiced his confidence in strengthening the relations with Moscow. Then the next day he said that he would like to keep Russian forces in the Republic. Can we flag any positive dynamics in relations? We have a very broad collaboration spectrum with Armenia, with many countries. We have some issues of tension, but I can't say that we see any focus on positive developments. We have certain links. I would like to understand what exactly you wanted to know. What would you like me to comment on? You spoke about someone's words. Pashinyan's words. Pashinyan claimed confidence in strengthening relationships with Moscow, and he let know that Russian forces will stay in the Republic because this issue has been brought up repeatedly. We have regular dialogue with Yerevan across all the agencies, and departments that have been tasked with such discussions, and probably these were some internal discussions. Probably this question was discussed within some expert circles of Armenia or within some communities. But in terms of our relationship with Yerevan, we haven't brought up this issue. Good afternoon. I'm from Business Code Agency in Moscow. My question is also about Armenia. Given the latest developments in Iran, we see the threat of some action on behalf of Azerbaijan and Zangezur corridor. How would you like to comment on that? So, during discussions yesterday between our president and mass media, I wouldn't like to discuss this issue. Our efforts are focused on de-escalation in the region. And here I mean Iran and Israel's aggression against Iran. We work with Yerevan and Azerbaijan in terms of normalization in the region. We have specific task groups and specialists who are competent to resolve these issues and who are doing so. So I don't want even to discuss this. The leadership has already spoken about this and they have commented this, so I can use their words. Azerbaijan and Armenia are dear to us as peoples and as nations. We have had relationships for centuries. We have close ties, and Iran for us is the country that we are developing relationship with. It's the region that has actually survived so many things. And today, our efforts and our policies have as a priority bringing stability and providing economic basis for this stability, rather than developing the conflict potential. Of course, there are numerous nuances there. You must know about them, and you've asked about Russian position, and I've commented on that. Please, next question. Good afternoon. Peter, News 24. My question will be about sport. Which shift do you see in global sports without the involvement of Russia, without the participation of Russia? And what can be done so that political implications of sport do not become obstacles, do not act as obstacles for our Russian athletes? Without Russian athletes, global sport has become weaker, and over the latest decades, sport has seen a panoply of destructive influences, and it has, in some terms, degraded. Today, they are discussing how to overcome the different forces, destructive forces in the Olympic movement that have been initiated with introduction of some gender aspects, some corrupt forms of competitions, and the latest Olympics have shown you what this is all about. It seems to me that officials representing global Olympic movement and global sport, that they should recognize and they should find audacity, and some are already doing that. Some are already saying that what we see is a way nowhere. It's conceived as a blow to Russia, but eventually it is a blow to sports itself. So one needs to focus on how to move forward, and global Olympic movement cannot be rooted in segregation, national segregation principles, and segregation based on double standards or elimination of rules for the benefit of political instructions. In this case, it will be not sport, it will be show business or something else. Sport is about physical capacities, it's about a combination of science and athletes' efforts, it's about education, it's about competition, endurance, power of will, and also interaction with other aspects. This is what sport is about. It's not about going back to Neolithic time to figure out who beat someone, who used which stone to beat another. It's not about who is beating who. It's sport is about strength, it's about achievements, it's about bringing together scientific accomplishments and power of will. It's about accumulating civilizational experience that has been replete with wonderful accomplishments. Another question? Thank you very much. Algerian English. Maria Vladimirovna, we have already quoted you when you spoke about the inadmissibility of Israeli strikes against Iran's sites, nuclear sites. And a colleague from Reuters asked you about what Russia can do for Iran beyond what Russia can do. Actually, a colleague from Reuters asked me about what Russia can do in general within the specific agreements and beyond them. And a follow-up question, what Russia could do so that use some probably leverages. Does it have some leverages? Probably some sanctions so as to bring this conflict to an end. Well, you have the right to ask this question, but I think we shouldn't speak of leverage as pressure, but we think we need to focus on convincing, on persuasion. You know, we have contacts, there are phone contacts, there were negotiations over the phone with Israel's leadership, as you know, and they have been described. The negotiation process on a peaceful nuclear program in Iran should be and can be continued. Russian leadership has flagged this at different levels. We have an experience, the globe has an experience, and it's important to understand what Iran wants, truly wants. We shouldn't imagine ourselves what the state wants, but we need to listen to what they think about what they want, how they explain it, that they want to develop this program under the monitoring of IAEA, and so that they bear some accountability, so that they fulfill their commitments, and so that they resolve all the issues based on mutual respect. That's what we are calling for. That's what we want to happen, and that's what we focus on as part of such talks. Yesterday, President answered several similar questions like that, and it's difficult to add, but please go back to his interview yesterday, his interview where he provided an exhaustive overview of all these issues. Because, you know, today we have already mentioned that this process, this negotiation process was already in action, underway, and it was disrupted by unprovoked aggression. So right now one needs to do everything to restore it, although it's very difficult, but that's how we see it.
Yes, next, please.
Здравствуйте, Анна Хамлюк.
My name is Anna Hamluk. Good afternoon. .ru. When are the cancer patients going to be evacuated from Israel?
Вы хотите о чем-то конкретном
Would you like
спросить?
to ask for any specific details? Yes. When are they going to be evacuated? All of them? Yes, all of them. I'm really sorry, but I think that you are asking a question on a very sensitive question. I think you should.
Composers and representatives of creative professions, scientists who got famous across the world. So many achievements have happened here which are of universal significance for the promotion of humanistic ideals in the best sense. And in the year of the 80th anniversary of the victory, I cannot but mention the heroic deed of the city. At that time it was called Leningrad. It survived the siege during the Great Patriotic War, full-fledged true genocide, as has been proved, which lasted for 872 days and claimed the lives of more than 1 million people. And actually these figures are not fixed. More and more data are arising about these numbers. The city was bestowed upon the status of hero city, and the feat of this city is symbolical and is an epitome of valor and courage, and it will forever stay in our memory. And I would like to say that at 5 o'clock there will be a session with the honorary guest, which will be the resident, Elena Bulina, the resident of our city. We have a unique opportunity to meet her and to talk to her, and there will be a presentation of a republished book of her recollections, her memoirs, the memoirs of her family, her diaries, her records. It has been republished with the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and sponsors. So
allegedly, this man is in Russia, and that's how it's justified to prosecute him. No, I think if we talk about any similar situation, actions cannot be justified. If you talk about legal persecution, they cannot be justified by one's ethnicity or nationality. Legal actions can be justified only by facts and evidence in favor of one's breaking the law. So unfortunately, I don't want to talk about a huge amount of comments that were made about the story. A Russian citizen, a Russian businessman, just like any other Russian citizen or Russian entrepreneur, always gets help if they come to our embassy or contact our embassy. Their families, their attorneys will get help. And you know that the statements have already been made, and in order to contemplate on the subject further with you, we need to see in detail what is happening there, direct charges, direct accusations, because there have been made so many statements by this point, very specific ones, that it is important for us to understand what we are talking about. But I would like to stress again that because he's a Russian citizen, Russian entrepreneur, he will get due assistance. Second question, I think you partly answered already, about Zamgeduk corridor. Mr. Belousov said that this is a tense situation in this region, and a congressman also said that there was a threat of escalation. How does Russia characterize the situation? So how do you assess the situation? As you know, that the process of de-blocking the corridors should be done only peacefully, and the most sure way to seize this blockade. And we think that it should be done by a group of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And the last round of these negotiations have been held. The parties were close to solving this issue. If you have any other questions? No. And another question about evacuating Russian citizens from Iran. The Foreign Ministry's website mentioned on the region near the border, did not mention whether people can evacuate from Armenia. Why did you declare only a way out through Azerbaijan? There is no political reason for this. There are no factual grounds to not use this corridor. There were no limitations, but this channel was not used. It had not been used before. There was no such tradition, but another corridor through Azerbaijan was used because there had been already experience using this channel, but after the first acute phase was over, the corridor through Armenia was also being used, and I already mentioned it today, and this information has already appeared today. So I thank you for your diligent attitude, because we do know that historically there has never been a case where Armenian friends and colleagues declined the possibility to use their land for evacuation. We never had any doubts, but logistically at that point there was more expertise accrued in the corridor in Azerbaijan. But now we already have improved the situation. We are grateful to our Armenian colleagues as well. After E, yes, good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna. Today We have a question about the following. Just recently, a solution was found thanks to you. No, I can only comment. I was not involved directly. I want to say that Russia always fully fulfills its bilateral agreement with Latvia from 2007, but the blame that the pensions were delayed in the first half of 2025 for our Russian citizens in other countries were due to our Western opponents who actually do not care about retired people, older people. The only thing they seem to care is the LGBT community. And people who earned their money, but now they're not having any access to this money, is something that these people rely on, but the West and their human rights activists don't care about these people. They blocked transactions from a Russian bank because it became victim to illegal sanctions. Russia is working to regulate the situation and by the officials who are responsible for this. Are there any details about when this is going to happen? Yes, I will find out from my colleagues. Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience here? We have the Голос Отечества. Are you with us?
Хорошо. Кого я, может быть, еще не назвала?
Else have I forgotten? Online? Anybody? Anybody wants to ask a question from online? Vladimirovna, good afternoon. Balt News. Thank you, Maria Vladimirovna. As you know, the media of the Baltic countries show Russia as an aggressor in media, but they completely ignore and not mention the crimes of the Kiev regime. And what are actions of Russia to counteract this? Do I understand your question correctly? Why are the Baltic states giving only a one-sided perspective on the conflict? The connection was quite bad. Yeah, so it's their role. That's their role to give this sort of perspective. My advice is to not only educate yourself on the Ukrainian conflict, but on your domestic issues, environment, culture, etc. Maybe look at the trajectory of your own country. But this is the niche. They are now have a delimited area where they are not allowed even to swim. They are just allowed to stand knee deep in water and not do anything. The function is to be, if you are a NATO state, you have to be aggressive. You have to constantly transmit this sort of view. They are following the commands of their Western masters, and they need to badmouth everything that is related to Russia, any Russian cultural or diplomatic or political contributions that were helping their own citizens. would be nice for them to try to revitalize these things, maybe to create their own educational clusters, try to maybe find new applications for scientific activities, try to understand who they are, etc. In the world, there are rules for every state, every country. What are these countries contributing? They really should find some self-identification. I'm not talking about the civilians, the citizens of these countries. I'm talking about the states. Unfortunately, they see their own role as just Russophobia and blatant hate against Russia. Let's find our last question. Young man. News.ru. We have one question. Will the Ministry of Foreign Affairs comment the statement by Donald Trump where he called Russia's expulsion from G8 a mistake? He said that if Russia was still part of the G8, this could have prevented the conflict in Ukraine. I think you have several questions there. And first of all, this is not the only mistake of the West, of G7, of the NATO-centric states. It's one of their mistakes. And Donald Trump mentioned the losses that the West incurred as part of the anti-Russian sanction war. Secondly, it would be nice to actually look at the full list of these mistakes for their own sake. Secondly, we need to call things by their own name. We were member of G8, but not full member. We were given a political role. We could not be an economic member of G8. We could not take part in economics-related actions. Also, G8 was flawed because it did not have major economies that are now one of key economies of the world. Also, in 2008, there was an economic crisis related to the credit bubble that burst in the US. The G7 was completely unable to help the world to undo their own mistakes. So G20 was created for this. So G7 created all these problems and created G20 in order to solve all these issues. And that is true. G20 was not just created as just a demand of time, but as a rescue team to save the global economy from the detrimental actions of the housing market of the US. So this was another proof of how one can call themselves the biggest, the best forever and never have an actual chance of fulfilling your own obligations. And that's how I would comment on this. So Russia has made its choice, and this choice in favor of the real mechanisms such as BRICS and the G20 and SCO that represent the multipolarity of the world, and G7 can do and group themselves as they want, 6+1, 8-1. I think that G7 is a format of the past. Thank you very much. If that's all, I would like to say goodbye for today and enjoy the forum in St. Petersburg and in Russia.